Today on The Rare Advisor, we're going to have an in-depth discussion about business scale and expansion. Over 80% of financial advisor practices are in this segment, and they don't even know it. Learn how to capitalize based on where you stand today. Stay tuned. Welcome again to The Rare Advisor. It's a business model that's supercharged by recurring and repeatable events. My name is Mike Walters. I'm sharing today once again with Steve Phillips, and we have been walking through some subject matter. It began with an explanation of what the three phases are of every financial advisory practice. You are in one or more of these three phases, whether you realize it or not. The important strategic thing is that you do, in fact, actually realize it, because then it helps you guide your practice. It helps you drive things forward in a logical and strategic sense. We were discussing the acquisition phase, meaning the client and asset acquisition phase in our previous discussion. Today, we're going to zero in on the business scale and expansion phase. And then following that will be the strategic succession and M&A phase. So in a moment, we're going to talk about expansion. But first, a quick favor. If you are finding value in these conversations, if this strategy is helping you drive your practice, please do us one favor: like, subscribe, and comment, whether you're watching by video, whether you're listening to the podcast. Either way, it's very helpful to us if you're liking, subscribing, and commenting. That's what allows us to keep this going and to keep driving good quality content your way. So with that being said, Steve, I'd like to jump straight into it. Discussions about business scale and expansion. As I've said so many times on these topics, I feel like this is really your wheelhouse. And so I love when we have you start by setting the foundation of that particular subset, that phase, if you will, business scale and expansion.
Yeah, and thank you, Mike. The thing with expansion, this is what we have found. I would say it's fair that about 90% of the advisors that we engage with, certainly in the business refinement side of things and the protocol division, 90% of the advisors find themselves in this particular phase. So in expansion. And as you had mentioned previously, and we talked about, acquisition never goes out of style, but expansion really seems to be where a big chunk of our industry is. And the first thing we mentioned about expansion is I'm big on trying not to lean on cliches. Let's go to the next level. Let's get over the top and whatever, because they're meaningless. Here's what expansion means to an advisor with something going on, which is pretty much 100% of the advisors that we work with, good practices. It's a plateau. So what does that mean? It means that advisors are doing things that are working well. They've got their own set of best practices. They've grown the thing. They've hit a plateau. And so really what we find is oftentimes in expansion, it is really just tweaking. We like to say it's the minor adjustments of things you're already doing well that lead to major improvements. Might be doing more of it, might be doing less of it. But typically what advisors do, it's kind of a glass ceiling, it's a plateau. We know we're onto something, we just can't seem to crack through that. And so that's the adjustment. There are two big words, or that's the phrase that we use. There are two big words that come to play in the expansion phase, Mike, and I know that you and I have talked about this a lot, and those are efficiency and scale. Really overcoming the plateau many times is helping advisors create efficiencies in their practice. And when you say that, if I'm on a Zoom, they'll chuckle, they'll laugh. Taking the processes, it's a paper to paper, get all the things that you're doing well, get them out of your head, put them down on paper. You have time to do that, don't you, Mike? You have another 8 hours in the week to do that, don't you? Well, that's something that we assist with. The creation of efficiencies. Who's seeing what clients? The lead advisor, that's, the 80-20 rule comes into play. If you're servicing everyone the same, if the lead advisor is seeing the C clients as often as he's seeing the A clients, those types of things is what we mean by creating efficiencies. And there are a number of things that we do there. Classifying clients. It's amazing to me and to us how many firms don't have any kind of classification. They've not really said, hey, are there A, B's, and C's? And when you do that, the next logical efficiency is to create the service matrix for those groups. Who receives what service? And are you providing services commensurate to the value different client groups provide to the firm? That's a gigantic efficiency, and one that a lot of advisors have thought about. And once we initiate processes, makes an immediate difference. You take a lead advisor and think of the names and the people that we deal with, Mike, and have those advisors focusing on best clients. Leads back to acquisition, doesn't it? Like we talked about, overlap. If I'm focusing on best clients, position everything as a service to those best clients, not shockingly, they start to duplicate themselves. So efficiencies is a big deal. The other word is scale. And here's what we found about scale. Every advisor defines scale as something different. Scaling efficiencies, that seems sort of redundant, but we have a lot of advisors say, I can't scale because I don't have the processes in place. So we start there. We have other advisors that say, you know what my idea of scale is? We got things going on really well. I'd like to hire a junior or 2 juniors. I need somebody, if I'm going to create the service matrix and the classifications, my idea of scale is duplicating myself, sort of making myself obsolete, if you will, so that I'm not dealing with the tier of clients, no disrespect, but I've got to be up here. That's an idea of scale. We have other advisors that tell us, look, what we're really missing is high-level admin, high-level back office support. And that is the missing piece of scale. And so what this whole conversation, Mike, leads me back to is the first in this group of these little presentations we did when we were doing the 30,000-foot overview of what the 3 phases are and how important it is to understand not just where an advisor is, but how do you define scale? How do you define creating efficiencies? And again, once we know that, think of the tools that USA and the power that we bring to applying our experiences and services when we know the issues that you have. So the idea of expansion, and you can see why, 90% of the advisors that we deal with, this is where they are. And I think it is a commodity that's sorely missing in the industry. How do we help you create the efficiencies? How do we help you create the scale?
So one of the things I always recommend to an advisor to wrap their mind around this is think in terms of the Rainmaker strategy, right? If you're the rainmaker in your practice, which most of the time that's the case, the owner of the practice is the rainmaker, and so what I need to do to get scale is I have to build around that rainmaker. And to your point, Steve, everybody's at a different stage, even within that expansion phase. So even though we're saying that 90 or 95% of the population out there who at least taps into USA Financial tends to be in that expansion phase, they're still all at different subsets of the expansion phase. So one of them might find, so again, if you're thinking in terms of building around someone as a rainmaker, then what we're having is a conversation about how do we utilize their time best well spent. So the first step might be, I need, as you pointed out a moment ago, I need some administrative support because I'm doing things that I shouldn't be doing. Somebody else should be doing those things. I don't get paid for doing those things. I need to pay someone differently to handle those things so that I can focus on what drives revenue. The other thing might be ultimately that maybe they need, again, if we're talking about almost a doctor-patient relationship, maybe they need to surround themselves with some support staff, the nurses, if you will, so that the doctors can stay on task. I need a team of nurses to take over some of the medical work, but not all of the most strategic medical work. Same analogy just applied to our industry. You can think of a law firm, same way that works on how you're going to have the partners versus the juniors versus the clerks and so on and so forth. And then finally, once you have worked out that Rainmaker team and you've got it tweaked as best as it can go, and now you're hitting capacities again, then that's the green light. That's the immediate indicator that just flashes at you that says, now it's time to bring on the next sub-advisor, the next generation, and build the team that way. And then as you point, you can go upscale then, because keep in mind, human nature is the average will always just find its place, right? Just the world in general centers itself on the average. So if you don't classify your clients, you're going to, whether you consciously or subconsciously realize it's going on, you will start duplicating your C-level clients because you will gravitate to average. You have to classify them, because until I classify them, I can't look at my A's and say, no, wait a second. I want to duplicate my A's. I want to get the average of my A's duplicated. If you don't segment, then by default, you're going to duplicate the wrong average. I don't want to average the whole herd. I just want to average the A client or the B client and above, or however it is you end up defining that.
Well, this is, and I am excited about the future of these sessions, because you and I have talked, there's so many individual. When you think of classifying, that's a whole session. And I'll speak to just what you had talked about. There are a couple of what we would call absolutes in the industry. And one of them is the 80-20 rule. It's the Pareto Principle. I have never, and I think of all the years that I've been out on the road and all the presentations and even all the individual advisors that I've had the privilege to coach and consult with, I promise you, not a single one. If I get in a group of 100 advisors and say, how many of you would say that 80% of your revenue is generated by 20% of your, every hand in the room goes up. Now, some guys, some practices will say, you know what, mine's more like 70-30. Some will say 90-10. But back to your point, where are you focusing? We talk about efficiencies and processes and indeed the effect on the practice, because here's where it stops, Mike. If we don't figure out organizationally how to manage the expansion phase that our firm faces, there is no succession.
Right.
Simply because I can't sell, I can't hand down, I can't lock in value with an inefficient practice. And so, again, when you talk about classifying as you did, who is working with the C clients? Is the lead advisor getting bogged down? I love your analogy of you're going to end up playing to average. And if your average is the C's, then there aren't a whole lot of advisors that you and I know that are looking to buy a practice that's focused on the C clients. No disrespect. All of those people make up the value of the practice, but well, you really land on a good one there when we talk about classification as a means of efficiency, and then of course scale with why the additional advisors matter. That's a big one.
Right. And the thing is that I think where people trip themselves up on that is they're afraid to categorize or to label, if you will, their clients, because they feel like, well, it's those smaller clients that helped me when I was growing my practice. And so the thing that's important to understand is we're not saying that you have to abandon those clients. We're just saying that you have to dial in the services of your practice accordingly based upon the value of the client. And if you were going to duplicate a client today, where you currently stand, or better yet, where you want to be 12, 24, or 36 months from now, what client would you be duplicating? Would you be duplicating one of the clients from the first 5 years of your career? Or would you be duplicating one of the clients from the last 24 months of your career? I would imagine it's going to be one of the more recents. And so this is not a process that ever stops, by the way. So what was an A client 10 years ago is probably a B client or a C client today, and so on and so forth. And that will continue on through time. So again, you don't have to abandon them. You just have to be aware of it so that you're dialing in your offerings appropriately and you're spending your money strategically.
There's a couple of other thoughts, and I love the A client from years ago could be a B or C, under the umbrella of the recycle that goes around, and we've seen it go the other way.
Ooh.
By virtue of a service matrix. Here's the thing too, and this I'm sure will be a separate topic that we cover. People don't get offended by understanding where they exist in not a practice, in society, in a business. Airlines have frequent flyers, and everybody knows everybody knows. Nobody gets offended by going, I'm a C client, and these are the services. People get offended, Mike, in our experience, when they get surprised.
Yeah.
No, suddenly so let's not surprise them. Let's share with them where they exist. And here's something that we found. You give an opportunity for C and B clients to what we call grow into the practice. Maybe I'm not doing all my business with you. Maybe I don't know that there are additional services I can get from you that I can't get from the other advisor I'm using to sort of hedge my bets, or I don't want all my eggs in one basket, or however clients say it. But if I knew the additional services that are available and those things that would apply to me. Maybe I have monies that you don't know about. Maybe I'll make the introductions that require me to become that B or A client. And so again, part of what we do at USA Financial, and of course in the protocol division, is to lay out those tracks. And what happens then is the 3 phases, they're not just fancy words that make it sound like, oh, we know what we're doing. We do know what we're doing. We find out where you are and then put these things in place to help the practice grow along. And so that's just one more example of that.
Yeah. As Yogi Berra famously said, when you get to a fork in the road, take it.
Yes.
Right? So we're creating forks in the road. So you're showing them, here's how you become an A client, or you can stay at this level of services with the firm, and that's okay too. So yeah, all of these things come together in terms of expansion and how that correlates with business scale. Hopefully you're finding this intriguing. You've enjoyed the conversations today. If so, I highly encourage you to dial into our next event coming up where we're going to dive into succession, including M&A. And between now and then, please give us a like, a subscribe, or a comment. That allows us to keep doing this for you here at the Rare Advisor, bringing this content to you in a high quality environment. So thanks so much. And please check us out again. We'll be back soon with the next session on succession. Thank you.